I wanted to share a few insights on Kundalinī Awakening, living with Kundalinī Awakening and skillfully working with an awakening. So I had an experience of awakening that unfolded in 2004 that went all the way to psychosis, and after that it was pretty clear that some kind of process had been activated in me that was continuing to run, and this is what we term Kundalinī Awakening. Once it happens, you kind of can't go back. Life shifts and changes. The benefit in my case was that I was already familiar with yoga and meditation, and I was already orientated to this idea of liberation in this lifetime. And liberation is nothing more than identifying the conditioning and identifying the identities and the roles and the patterns that make up who we think we are, and beginning to dissolve those patterns, those identities, those roles, and that conditioning. And when we do all of that, when we identify it and then we dissolve it, we become a free and spontaneous, playful being. We're just ourselves as such. And there ceases to actually be any sense of fixed identity. There is just awareness expressing itself through the being. So because I already had that orientation, I already had that understanding, even though at the time I didn't call what had happened to me Kundalinī Awakening. It wasn't until a couple of years later that I realized that was a label you could give it. I was still very much focused on yoga and focused on meditation and the teachings of yoga, like way more than physical yoga, as a means to heal and recover from the experience of psychosis, recognizing that the psychosis had come out of awakening that I was not yet prepared for. So it's now 16 years later, and I'm living a grounded, integrated life of, I love my life. I love life. Life's freaking amazing. And it has required me to face into all of my attachments, all of my ideas, all of my beliefs, all of my aversions, all of the things that I grasp and cling and avoid and have been afraid of. And to let it all go, it doesn't quite encapsulate it, but it's like seeing things for what they are, and then recognizing what is actually unfolding, and then making a choice of how I want to be in relationship to it. So recognizing, for example, when I was using a relationship in order to feel good about myself, and that just doesn't lead to good things. Basically recognizing any time I was attempting to use anything external to me in order to feel a particular way, which it will never work, because the moment the external thing is taken away, the job, the salary, the partner, the house, then because that's been taken away, we don't feel good about ourselves anymore, because it was dependent upon the external thing. So there's this whole body of work that is called awakening and liberation. And this is so when there's some kind of Kundalini awakening that unfolds, what often happens is there's a disruption to the person's normal life, and the person feels like something has gone wrong and they want to get back to how they were. And I work with quite a few people that have had, awakenings, and that's often the orientation that they're bringing to our initial sessions. Things have gone wrong, and I need to figure it out. I need to get back to where I was so I can make everything okay again. But that's never going to work. You can never go back to the way that things were. That's the truth of it. It's shifted, it's changed. You're not the same person. Reality is not the same. And instead, it's so much more useful to get really clear on where you want to move toward. And in my case, I wanted to move toward liberation in this lifetime. The awakening I'd had gave me a taste, it gave me an experience of what it was like to live with no fear, to live with no beliefs, to live with no projections, no ideas, no attachments, no aversions. And being in that space of non-duality is just like, and I wanted to be there again. And of course the irony in it is that it's not that I am there again, because the I is what must dissolve. This false self, this false identity that we carry through with us. And so that's been the work for myself over the last 16 years. And I'd say there was a good solid 12 years of integration post-awakening, and now there's been a solid sort of 4 years of seeding and flowering to come to this place where I am now. So if you have experienced some kind of awakening, if it feels like your life has been disrupted, if you're having all kinds of weird physical experiences and you don't want that shit to be going on, that's the first thing to look at, is to recognize that if you are not wanting what is already happening, you're in resistance. And if you're in resistance, it will cause suffering. And as scary and as painful as it might be, the first step is so often to deeply accept and be okay with what's unfolding, even if it means losing your job, even if it means losing your house, even if it means losing your relationship. Which is not to say these things aren't painful. Like, I know the pain that can be present. And that's why another of the first steps is to learn how to orientate to awareness itself, or essence nature as we call it in the tantric lineages. Because when there's an ability to know oneself as awareness, to become essence nature, then there's an ability to hold pain. There's an ability to hold grief and to let grief run its course. There's an ability to hold betrayal, abandonment, all of these really painful things that are part of being a human being, and that awakening is calling us into feeling. Because to awaken doesn't mean that you're calm and peaceful and blissed out all the time. Awakening simply means that you're able to immerse in reality as it is, and that's sometimes painful. Just feeling into if there's any other reflections to give. I mean, I'm so grateful. I mean, I've been grateful for a long time for the experience I had, even though I ended up, in psychosis and in a psych ward twice. I knew enough to realize that this was a gift, going through those experiences. And it was really painful. My life was challenging and painful and hard for the first 7 or even 10 years after that. I really had to put myself back together, and I inadvertently, tried to use all the strategies that had got me in the trouble in the first place in so many ways, and created more suffering for myself because I didn't know any better. And you can read about some of that journey in my book, Sex, Drugs, and Mostly Yoga. But yoga, it's why it's mostly yoga. Like yoga, the practice of yoga, the teachings of yoga, the perspective of yoga, the view of yoga has been what's anchored me and led me and guided me and held me through this process. So if you are experiencing some kind of awakening, what I would suggest is you reach out and you find a teacher that understands, you find a lineage or a practice or a tradition that knows how to work with these things skillfully, and you lean in, you turn in, and you go, okay, well, this has happened to me. It's already happening. How do I want to relate to it? Where do I want to let it take me? So much love.